Hello and welcome. So today we're joined on our podcast by a very special guest, an esteemed professional genealogist with years of experience helping people unlock their family stories. And we're going to be chatting about something that often gets overlooked in genealogy, but it can make a world of difference, and it's methodology. So probably by now, those of you who are keen on genealogy methodology and are used to using it in your research or are wishing to might realise that we're talking to Dr Sophie Kay. So,
Hello.
hi Sophie. We're talking to you now because you've got this fantastic new online course, haven't you, coming up with Family Tree. And
Oh, I can't
you're
wait.
teaching
Yeah.
us, about these really practical tools like research logs and focused questions and planning techniques so that we can all feel more confident and organised and productive. So, everybody grab a cuppa, sit back and enjoy the conversation because we're sure you're going to love what you hear. So, welcome, Sophie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Helen. Always a joy to get a chance to have a good genealogical chat with you.
Yes, especially about this wonderful topic. So, I guess really for to kind of get us all up to speed, why do you think having a clear research methodology is so important in genealogy?
Oh, well, I think really if we're going to answer that one, we have to come back to what is it we're hoping to achieve as genealogists. And I think we do all come to family history for a variety of reasons. But I think a lot of us really want to immerse ourselves in the ancestral stories to be found. We want to build, in many cases, build and understand a sense of identity based on the identifying our ancestors, understanding who they were and what happened to them, and piecing together those threads of history to sort of understand where we fit into all of it. And I think for that reason, we really want to understand that we are identifying our ancestors and not some little errant namesakes of theirs that have somehow accidentally sneaked into our family tree. So, really, a research methodology can sound scary if someone hasn't, tried to approach things in a more sort of structured way before. But I want you to think of a good research methodology as being like the scaffolding that's going to help you construct a really wonderful building. I think sometimes there can be maybe a misconception that being very structured and focused about our research takes all the fun out of it, but I would say absolutely not. If you put a really good scaffolding in place, it's not going to dominate the whole picture. It's just going to give you the support that you need to find the real genealogical gems. So, all of those ancestral stories you're looking for, you will find far more of them. You'll go into more depth with them. You will find the most wonderful discoveries that are absolutely lighting you up with joy or surprise or all sorts of other emotions that you might go through. And I think we get a much more fulfilling experience if we just have that scaffolding in place to begin with. So I would say yes, it's a really really important aspect of getting the brilliant ancestral stories out, but also making sure they are really our ancestors and not somebody else's.
Mm. So I guess my next question ties into this a little bit. So what are kind of some common mistakes or a common mistake that you see when people don't take I can't say it, methodological approach to their family history research?
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose we've already touched on one of those, haven't we? I guess what I would call the namesake invasion. That's the sort of classic problem that you come up against as a family historian. And if and it can happen to any of us, I think it will happen to many of us at some point. And one of the challenges of if a namesake rather than your ancestor sneaks into your family tree, because our family history research is cumulative. We start with ourselves, we establish what we know, and then we build back a generation at a time from there. So with horror, we can realize a certain step along the way that if we make a mistake somewhere and we get the wrong person in our family tree, everything after that point may not necessarily involve our ancestors. So I think often if we don't have a methodical approach, namesake invasion is more likely to happen. Sometimes it can be that you don't end up with a full on namesake invasion, but maybe you could find yourself kind of getting a bit tied in knots. Those brick wall problems sometimes happen simply because, not through any fault of our own, but simply because maybe the particular historical records we need simply haven't survived. We can't do much about that, but we can do a lot about our search process, understanding what is the true extent of the amazing historical records that are available to us? How can we use those to maximum effect? And how can we pick up vital clues. I think sometimes when we hit a brick wall, and in cases where it's not to do with a missing or destroyed or lost historical record, when we hit one of those brick walls that's to do with us losing our way, that's something where having that scaffolding, that methodology is really, really going to help us. So if somebody maybe hasn't ever tried putting a scaffolding in place for their family history before, and they say, oh, no, no, I don't want to do it. I just want to get on with the search. I would say try and invest just a little bit of time to start with in pausing to think about where you're going, where you think you're going with this research and what you're doing, because it will open your eyes to all of the amazing things that are out there. And I think just giving ourselves time to pause, I think, is one of those speculate to accumulate approaches where just a little bit of time invested early on in working out what it is we're actually doing doesn't just help us get to the answer in many cases. It often opens up a much richer experience along the way.
Mm. So this is something which does take a little bit of time, but is worth it, isn't it? I think so. Many family historians do skip keeping a research log, and to anyone who keeps a research log, this kind of makes them have a kind of heart pang that anyone skips out of doing it. But it's easy to think it's not important. It's easy to think you will remember it. So why do you think this step is so often overlooked? And why do you think people do overlook keeping a research log? And what do you think people are missing out on as a result of not keeping a research log?
Oh gosh, that's a brilliant question, Helen. I think actually, when a lot of people maybe don't keep a research log, I think there is a perception that, oh, it's such a drag, it's dull and it's boring. And I mean, I must admit, it's not the most scintillating aspect of family history research, actually keeping that log. But what is amazing is the wonderful research that it facilitates as a result. And keeping a research log is actually, on the scale of things, a really small time investment. I know in our previous conversations, Helen, you and I have sort of likened it to brushing your teeth, haven't we? That you don't just brush your teeth once and say, "Excellent, I've brushed my teeth once in my life. I can go on with the rest of my life now, and it's all fine." And we don't necessarily, hopefully, feel that it's a wild drag every day brushing our teeth. It's actually a really small time investment, but it means our teeth don't rot in our head. And so it's, there are analogies to be had there, aren't there? I think if we don't want to see decay of our genealogy, I think it can be worth just investing a teeny bit of time to keep a research log. And so I think sometimes there's a perception that it's dull and boring. I think what's
Mm.
really important is to say, actually, what are the really wonderful benefits that are coming out of keeping a research log? And when we really understand just how much in terms of advantages we're getting from investing a little bit of time in a good research log, we can then see just, how we and indeed our ancestral research are going to benefit from that.
So, as genealogists, we always feel pressed for time, don't we? Time is really, really precious. But, in what sort of way can a well kept research log actually save us time, even though it might seem like it is a little bit of extra time to fill it in? Then how can it save us time?
Oh, lots of different ways. So I think this brings us back to the idea of the problem patches of family history or brick walls. I think we've all, at some stage, no matter how long you've been doing your family history, we are all going to hit a stage where we go, I'm puzzled about this bit of research. Maybe there's a particular named individual that I am struggling to locate, or maybe there's a particular search that I don't seem to be able to resolve. And if we can find a way of retracing our steps, that is really going to help us. If we can say, oh, do you know what? Maybe I feel like I've run 45 different searches for this individual and I'm not getting anywhere with it. Why am I not getting anywhere with it? And that's bewildering. We all go through that point. And if you happen to have even a simple research log that can help you retrace your steps. So if you are in the thicket that's all thorny and brambly and you're thinking, I'm completely lost, I feel bewildered, I've run all these searches and I do not know where I am. Your research log is like this little backtracking map that can help you find your way back to base and say, I can see what I've searched. And based on that, it's giving me enough perspective to see what I've not done. Because there's that wonderful rush we all go through when we're in the middle of it. And nowadays, a lot of online systems are, you know, they're very much set up to enable quick searches. And sometimes it's easy for anyone to fall into the trap of making lots of quick searches, which might feel like they make sense to us in the moment. But then when we've got to look back on what they actually were, it's actually quite difficult for any of us to remember precisely what we did. So I would say retracing your steps. If you can't find somebody, if you've got a brick wall and it doesn't seem to resolve, You can use your research log to say, what was I actually doing with this research? Which record sets have I looked in? And actually, does that mean, are there maybe particular searches I haven't run? Have I been typing in a particular combination of letters for my ancestor's name? And maybe there's a variant or some misspelling or some other way this person might appear in the records. And maybe I've not covered that. It helps us notice blind spots. And the other thing I would say is vastly like a benefit of research log versus not logging your research. Not all of us have time to do research every single day. I will say, as a professional genealogist, I spend all of my time on private client work rather than my own ancestors. So I am lucky if I get 2 or 3 sessions a year spent on my own family tree. So I would say to anyone, if you are an occasional researcher, if life gets in the way and you find that you can't research on a regular basis, it's really important to be able to come back to a log and say, where was I last time I left off with this research 6 months ago? And what was I doing? And
Mm.
if in your log you're keeping track of, for example, particular bits of evidence you've ordered, you might well, in the interim since you last researched, have had some physical copy marriage certificates delivered to you, or there might have been an archive that you contacted for a reproduction of a particular document. You might have forgotten having done that and risk redoing the whole process all over again. I think most of us have that common experience of, oh darn, when this thing came through in the most recent order, I've already seen this. And I think if you can also use your research log to just gently keep track of when you have ordered a document, just pop in the reference for it and say, today I ordered this document. If, for example, you were to do that in a spreadsheet, does not have to be a spreadsheet. There's a multitude of ways you can keep a family history research log. Find a way that works for you. But yeah, I would say you can very much keep tabs on the reference numbers of things that you're acquiring. And in whatever form it is, if you just run a quick search on that before you're tempted to place an order for it, you might save yourself a lot of money as well as time in the process.
That's a really good idea. I mean, I think we've all got to hold our hands up. I'd be amazed if anyone hasn't ordered something twice or been excited about finding something and then realise they've actually already found it before. So you touched on Excel there, and obviously it can be in many different formats, but what sort of advice would you give to somebody who's never used a research log before, but is listening to you and thinking, "Do you know, I would like to be a bit more organised. I would like to stop going round in circles reading the same thing, and I would like to get the benefits you've been describing of being a bit clearer about what I have found and being able to pick up my research." So where would you start? Imagine you've been doing some family history, maybe even for a few years. You've never used a research log before. Where to start? Like, how do you literally kind of get away from that blank page and start that research log?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely what we all need to be thinking about, isn't it? How do I actually step into keeping a research log to begin with? Now, even though in an ideal world we'd be able to keep a really wonderfully detailed research log, that's the sort of like peak of it to try and aspire to. But at the same time, what I would say is you don't have to be jumping in at the top level to begin with. I would say the best place to start. This is about habit forming. A bit like the way that you don't really have to think about brushing your teeth. You just do it because that's what you do every day. And I'm sure everyone listening to this and thinking about research logs, whether or not you keep one yet, you'll all have a habit or series of habits you go through for your particular genealogy routine. You've probably got a particular space that you like to work in, certain things you like to do, certain tabs on your internet browser that you open up first, and you will fall into those habits without even realizing it. So actually, the place to start is to say, I am going to get into the habit of at least once every research session, keeping some sort of track of what I did. So the best way to start is start simple. Your entry in the research log to begin with, if you're just trying to habit form, try and note down the date today when you're researching, maybe the branch of your family that you were working on, and maybe the particular person or persons of interest that you were researching. And if you can make a note of which record sets you were searching in and what database or what online provider or indeed what physical archive you were at, note those down. So that's the habit forming stage where you're just saying, can you make one entry to just remind yourself of roughly what you were doing and, if you ordered any documents. Over time, as you start to form that habit that just starts to become natural of end of the research session, okay, I will type in the date and details of what I did and where I searched and all the rest. You might then start to feel more comfortable to expand that habit and say, oh, do you know what? As I go, I'm going to open up a separate list in this, if you're using a spreadsheet or maybe a traditional notebook or something else entirely, and start to note down the details of precise searches you've run. So I actually have a series of spreadsheets for my personal family history research. Each surname gets its own separate spreadsheet. And I love the tabbed facility in spreadsheets. So I have a master log that's like an overview log of what broadly one line in each research session, what did I do, which branch was I working on, which people, and did I order any documents. And then I have a separate spreadsheet referring to the surname and the people, and each person gets a separate tab within that log. That works for me. That wouldn't necessarily be the way for everyone. So that's a much more extensive system that I've described. I've got all of these spreadsheets and tabs going on, and that helps me keep tabs in detail on what I'm actually doing. But I would say if you're starting out, do not feel overwhelmed. If you suddenly decided that you want to run a marathon today and you have never ever even gone out jogging in your life, it would be crazy, wouldn't it, to sort of say, "Oh, do you know what? I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to run a marathon every single week for the next year." Have you ever run before? Well, no, no. So don't start with the marathon. What do? You say, "Do you know what? Maybe I'm going to pull on my trainers and I'm going to go out for a brisk walk every day." And I'll get into the habit of doing that. And maybe if I think that's doing some good, maybe I'll decide at that point where to go from there. It's all about habit forming. So don't beat yourself up about, oh, I've never done a log before. Just start. See where it takes you. And also, my other tip would be each researcher is an individual. Just because you've got a genealogical friend who swears blind that their particular way of doing a research log is the only way, that might not necessarily work for you. The best research log, this might seem like a bit of a truism, but the best kind of research log is one that fits with you and you'll stick to. Comes back to that habit forming idea. You're
Mm.
trying to leave a trail of breadcrumbs to older you. And believe me, if you can just get into the habit to begin with of saying, "Do you know what, I'm going to write down one single dated note each time I have a research session,"
Mm.
and build from there and start to shape your practice of how you keep a research log
Mhm.
according to what dovetails with your approach to things and what feels comfortable and right for you. I've, in teaching many different genealogists over the years as well, I've had the sort of privilege of hearing about different people's approaches. And I will have some people who say they don't get on at all with spreadsheets. And so at that point, I will say, well, in that case, if you hate spreadsheets, don't feel you have to use spreadsheets for a research log. That won't be a habit you keep to. Find something else that does work for you and you'll stick to it. So there's more than one way to do this. And so it's a case of finding a way that works for you and forming a habit. And then just see where the research log and your ancestors lead you from there.
Great. I love it. I love that nice, simple starting point you said. Just a date and a name. It's a bit like being a child back at school and the name of the branch and then
Oh,
something.
absolutely. I mean, I know you
Yeah.
keep a research log, don't you, Helen? So where did you start with a research log? And is it still in the same sort of format as when you started, or have you expanded it or changed how you keep it over time?
Oh, absolutely, I've changed it. I could bang on about it for ages, but I'll tell you a little bit. So I started keeping a research log because I suddenly realised I'd been researching for about 10 or 15 years and I didn't really know what I'd done over the last 10 or 15 years. Part of me felt like crying and the other part of me thought, well, the only way to stop this is by being more organised. And I'm not a naturally organised person when it comes to things like that, but in my middle and later years, I've become more organised. I learnt the hard way. That's why I'm so keen on everybody not doing what I did and not wasting all that time. So um, whenever I set up any research session, I will always open up a Word document and I will have an ongoing set of things that I do, which I don't want to talk about yet because we're going to touch on some of them a bit later. But I will have my research question and I'll have a research plan, and then I will start logging what I've done. And it's a bit like Graham Bandy always says, or the military always say, the plan doesn't survive first contact with the enemy. So you have your research plan, and then as soon as you actually start searching, you find other records you hadn't thought of, um,
Absolutely.
or records you had hoped don't exist, or whatever it is. So I do that in my Word document, and then I do something which is thanks to you. I have a master research log, but I've
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, you told me a few years ago. So I have a research log for all of my different little things I do, and some of them might be brick walls, some of them might be individual people, some of them might be individual branches. I'm a proper rabbit hole. I just adore my rabbit holes. So it means that I have lots of project folders. I don't even know how many, 30 or 40 project folders each. And I will pick any one of these as I feel like it, which if you didn't have a research log would just be a nightmare. But as it is, I can pick up any of my projects, and I might not have looked at them for months or even years, pick them up, and my research log will now tell me where, and at the bottom I write to do next time. And so I can just pick it up and it will tell me what to do next time. So I get right back in the flow. But the master research log is thanks to you. So I do actually add just a quick one line, so then I know where I last worked on the project. Oh, what a waffly answer. Anyway, let's go
Oh,
back
not at all.
to
I think
Sophie.
there's that sense of picking up the threads, actually,
Yeah.
isn't there, Helen? Of
Yes. It's thanks so much.
older us thanks younger us for doing
And I thank you for the master research log. So, I mentioned it just a little moment ago there about research questions, and I think this really ties into keeping our research focused. That's what a log does. That's kind of keeping us focused about what we've done. But scrolling it back a bit in our research process, right back to the beginning, really, it's setting out that research question. So, how do you feel that like a strong research question can help us break through brick walls? Because that's when we really need this methodology, isn't it? When the going gets tough.
Oh, absolutely. As you say, the point where that scaffolding, that methodology really comes into its own is when we are dealing with a really challenging genealogical problem. It will help us all the rest of the time as well, but when we're facing something really tricky, all of this helps us even more. I would say a research question is there to prompt action. And the important role it has isn't for you to just ask it at the beginning and then kind of forget about it and wander off doing things. I think actually the process of forming your research question gets some really interesting thoughts whirring inside your head. Because what I usually tell people to do as well is not just to form a research question, particularly for those tricky topics they're trying to untangle. It's actually to write it down physically. Get a pen and write down your research question. Because actually, even the most experienced researchers can have an abstract thought floating in their head of course, I know what I'm doing and what I'm searching for. But until you are forced to put it down in words with particular phrasing, you think, oh, I'm actually getting a different sense now of what I think I'm asking. And a lot of the time, if we're perhaps not running wide enough searches, or perhaps we are not searching in the right record sets, often it can be that we think we've got a research question in play in a very abstract, floating around in our heads sort of sense. And it turns out that we are not addressing the research question we think we're trying to work with. And actually, forming a research question is one of those things that needn't take a long time at all, actually. But the process of thinking about it prompts all sorts of other thoughts in your head that make you go, actually, what is it I'm trying to answer here? And sometimes you can have been bashing your head against that brick wall for months and months in some cases. And if you haven't had a research question in play, all it can take can be stepping back long enough to say, what am I actually trying to do here? What question do I think I'm trying to answer? And then you write it down and look at it and you go, maybe what I'm trying to do, maybe I've made too many assumptions about, narrow assumptions about where and when I think I should be searching for this person. Maybe the process of writing that research question helps you know yourself a bit more and then prompts action in particular ways to say, I've written down this research question. That's going to get me thinking in a practical way about where I am going to search and what practical steps I'm going to take, what I'm going to do to try and answer that question. And this goes back to habits, doesn't it, Helen? We talked about the idea that we've all got our favourite places to search. We've probably, to be honest, all got our favourite record sets to work with as well. You sort of don't want to feel that you've got favourites when there are so many amazing record sets out there, but we do all have our favourites and we've got our habits. And I think if we don't at least sometimes pause to say, actually, in a concrete way, what question am I trying to answer here? It doesn't give us the chance to pause and orient ourselves in the records. Because a lot of the time we might risk jumping into our favourite record sets out of enthusiasm and not realizing that actually a whole other series of record sets we could be looking at, maybe we don't even know they exist yet. And we might not necessarily happen upon those by chance. But if you just take a little bit of time to write down a research question and then maybe generate a little research plan from that, that process will prompt you to say, what's actually available? Can I identify the where and the when of my search? And based on that, what records are available? And no matter how long anyone's been researching you, even professionals will find all the time that a particular case will take them into a record set they didn't even know existed. And it's the most wonderful. It's like the sort of kid at Christmas sort of feeling where you think, oh, I've discovered this whole record set I didn't know about, and it's really wonderful to work with and explore for the first time. You discover those often as the result of stepping back, having a little pause, and having a research question that prompts you to take action. Because once you're saying, what do I actually need to ask? What am I asking? And then what actions do I need to take to respond to that question? You will actually start to find particular record sets because you know to go looking for them. You'll discover that you maybe have sort of blind spots along the way that you didn't know certain things existed. You can find them then. And that scaffolding being in place just reminds you to stay curious when not just when you're running your searches for an ancestor, but when you're actually deciding what to do each research session.
So that's about how helpful a research question can be. But again, imagine if you're not used to using a research question, is it possible to have a bad research question, or are there some kind of pitfalls or hallmarks that you can point out to us of a kind of how to pick out what's a bad question and what could be a better question? Have you got anything you could say?
Oh, absolutely. I think really, if we're thinking about why might a research question or when might a research question be poorly framed, it goes back to the idea of a research question is there to prompt action. So it's not there as some terrible drag that's sucking the time away. It's there to serve you. It's there to help you decide where you need to go with your research. So if your research question doesn't immediately prompt action, that means it's kind of slightly not doing its job as a research question. So if you've written it in a way that's too vague
Mm.
and it doesn't really say to you, oh, I am, I need to go off and do tasks X, Y, Z, then it probably means you need to rethink. Really, the two at the other ends of the sort of opposite ends of a scale, two other problems that can often happen when someone's formulating a research question is either that it's too broad, and you would just be, if you tried to answer a particular research question that's super broad, you would just be overwhelmed saying, I've kind of got too many directions I can go in with this. Nobody can deal with all of that in one go. So you're just overwhelmed by this, crazy landscape view of things in front of you. The other end of the scale, the other problem with some research questions can be that they are too narrow. So what we always want to do in a research question is make sure it's like the rudder of a ship, that it's giving us purpose, focus, and direction. So if you were to sort of over specify your research question and say, oh, I'm looking for John Smith that was born in Basingstoke between 1873 and March 1874, and you're not willing to accept anything outside that, it could be that a too narrow research question causes you to be a little bit blinkered in your approach, kind of almost introduces biases into your work that wouldn't be there otherwise. So really the research question, there's a bit of an art to it. I would say to people, don't feel intimidated by it if you've never written one down before. As with all of these things in genealogy, we learn as we go. And sometimes you look at a question, you go, maybe I'm sort of being a little bit too precise with this. Maybe I need to open up that research question because it should be allowing me to reflect on my work. It
Mm.
should be inviting me to get excited about not just one record set, but maybe lots of different record sets I might be able to search in and get working together in order to delve into that ancestral story.
Thank you. I love that example of the too narrow question. That's such a danger I can see me and many other people falling into. So yeah, really
It's
useful.
understanding that sometimes our focus can be too narrow and we go,
Mhm.
"Oh, maybe I've not found something," and it's because I was taking too narrow a view of it, and if we're willing to pause on that research question and say, "Actually, what am I assuming about this whole thing based on what I've written down as the question I think I'm answering?" And if you look at your research question after you've written it and you think, oh, that's actually speaking to a few assumptions about where and when I think this event happened. Maybe it's just a little bit too narrow. Having a where and when is great in a research question
Mm.
because we need a where and when, don't we, to start saying, what time period am I searching in? What records are available for that particular place? But if we narrow it down too much, we might sort of slightly shoot ourselves in the foot. So, yeah, there's a bit of an art to writing research questions, but as with the research logs, giving it a go can get us thinking in really exciting new ways about what's actually out there and making sure we are making the absolute most of this wealth of materials that we've actually got to rely on in our research.
Mm. I am a big fan of research questions, and I like it because I am a bit of an addict for rabbit holes. And having the research question, even if I do inadvertently dive off down a rabbit hole, it brings me back to what my main purpose is. And I go, it's even if once I emerge from the rabbit hole, I'm like, okay, so what am I actually trying to do? And it does help to keep me coming back to
It's like that rudder of the ship, isn't it,
yeah,
Helen?
it
Yeah,
does. It really
so
works.
come back to it. Yeah.
Absolutely right. Definitely does. So we've got our questions in place and we are logging what we're doing. But many people, it's so tempting, especially nowadays with online research, isn't it? It's just, we can just dive into the records. We don't have a plan. What are the kind of risks of just jumping in? What are we missing out on?
But it
What can
can
go
be,
wrong?
that jumping in can feel exciting. It's like when you dive into a kid's ball pool and there's just stuff everywhere, and it can feel all very colourful and exciting. But again, it sort of can mean that we lose direction altogether and we don't actually find things that we should be finding and could be finding. There might be really rich parts of the story, or maybe technically speaking, really important details that are critical to the success of our search that we might risk missing. And having a plan in place can help us make the most of it, can help us, take that research question we've written. That's giving us purpose, it's giving us direction. The research plan is effectively where you take that research question and plant it like a seed in the ground and let it flourish. And with it, your research will flourish too. So I think that idea of going down rabbit holes, I don't ever want to close off for people. I think sometimes there's, again, that misconception that by having a structured approach where you've got, a research log and questions and plans, sometimes people can misconstrue that as, oh, but you're taking all the fun out of it. And I'd say, no, 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 absolutely not. The fun is a guaranteed element of it. It's, as we've said, it's the scaffolding that's going to help facilitate even more of the fun and even more of the insights. So really, with a plan, what I would liken it to is that's supporting the logical, critical thinking elements of your research. Those rabbit holes and bright, shiny objects, for me, speak to some of the creative elements of our research. So that's why I would say you should never be shutting off completely the avenues where you wander. It is in our nature to wander and explore things. And sometimes a temporary wandering off the track can maybe take us somewhere that we weren't anticipating and help us towards an unexpected discovery that can be very valuable. And for me, that speaks to a lot of the shift in perspective we can give ourselves. And that creative thinking that a shift in perspective involves is a natural partner to the critical thinking that comes with that structure of the research plan and the research question. And it's more that when you combine creative and critical thinking, it's like you supercharge your research. So,
Nice.
but you need to have that plan and question to come back to,
Mm.
even in some loose form, so that you actually don't wander from the path. I would also liken it to, it's a little bit, I mean, you could argue that all of our family history is effectively like a series of missing persons inquiries. And if somebody goes missing, you don't just casually run out into the street and run in an undirected way and just keep shouting their name in the hope that you happen upon the place where they are. That wouldn't be a productive use of time. It wouldn't use the search to the maximum of its ability. So what do we do? If there's a missing person in modern life, we'd say, well, where were they last seen? What were they wearing? Who are the people, the network of people around them? Can we use those as clues to structure and prioritize where we are searching? And it's very much the same principle when we step into family history. It's a series of missing person inquiries. You don't want to run into those record sets just casually yelling out their name, because you might trip over a lot of things on the way. And you also might find that you just don't get the results that you want and need. Whereas if you're prepared to invest a bit of time in the structure, you can prioritize what you're doing. And that's going to give you a better chance of success. And it means that when you do happen upon good finds, you're going to be much better equipped to use that critical thinking to join all of the dots and marry it up with the creative thinking that's coming from other avenues of your research. So for me, I think having the plan in place doesn't just provide a brilliant productive structure to ensure we are using our time and efforts and money really wisely in genealogy, but it's also helping us harness that beautiful creativity to identify and unveil the really rich stories in family history, which I think we might risk passing us by if we didn't have that structure in place.
I love your analogy. That's so helpful as well with the missing person inquiry. That's definitely really, really shows you the importance of it. So it's really useful, isn't it? But I think it when we're doing our family history at home, sometimes we can feel a little uncertain. Like, have we got it right? Are we doing the right thing? Are we following the right path with our own ancestors? Or have we got an mother?
Absolutely.
In what sort of way does a research plan kind of give us a confidence to move forward? And especially when things are getting more complicated.
Oh,
Although,
so many ways. No, I think that's
mm,
that's a great question, Helen, because I think it also reminds us in what you've just asked there that we're not just bringing these elements of logs, questions, and plans into our research to just waste time or be boring and structured. It's everything you bring into your research, any strategy that comes into your research should always serve a useful purpose. And what the plan is really helping us do is sort of parse and manage the vast array of information and documents and evidence that come our way. Because as I often say to people when I'm teaching genealogical sort of methods, we are never ever using one record in isolation or one record set in isolation. The key to success in family history is getting many different resources cross-checked against each other and working together. That's a tall order, and I think anyone who's done any amount of family history will understand how rapidly the sheer volume of stuff that we're dealing with builds up, and that's a formidable task in itself to deal with. And I think what a research plan can really do is help us see the sort of broad vista of everything that's available. Because when you first come into the research plan, you should have a question formulated that you're trying to answer. That gives you the where and when of your research, which then allows you a bit of time when you're forming that research plan to say, I've got some context here. Can I maybe be prompted to spend a little bit of time to find out what records are available? Get myself out of my comfort zone, not just working with the records I'm familiar with, but maybe find out a broad range of things that I could be looking at and prioritize them. So it means you've got a richer genealogy because you're working with more elements. But the research plan will just help you keep on top of the priority ordering you're giving those and allows you the flexibility. I know earlier on, Helen, you touched on the idea that think plans can evolve as you go. They very much should, in a sense, because one of my favorite guiding principles in this is that ancient Chinese saying, change is the only constant. And I think that's true of many things in life. It's also true of research plans. You don't want to use the research plan. It should never be this rigid stick to beat yourself with. It's very much a guideline plan that adapts depending on what is coming out of your research. You may well find that you follow the first two steps of your research plan. Maybe you've searched in two particular record sets. Maybe that second record set throws up a finding that's so seismic, it completely changes your perspective of what the story actually is in this research. You might then need to have some flexibility to say, oh, do you know what? I'm going to reappraise what my plan needs to be now. Maybe I need to reprioritize the ordering of some of those record sets. And it just helps us keep tabs on the many different things we could be doing and help us look at it like sort of things on a shopping list and say, well, I could do any of these. I can only realistically do one thing at a time, though. So what's the next most important thing for me to do? It's also fantastic having a research plan if you happen to collaborate with other researchers. Maybe you've got, family members that are really keen to get on board helping you with your research. If you've got a research plan, you can share that with them as well, and it can help them. You can invite them into your research and say, there are all these different things we're doing. Maybe, I can take, the second item on the plan, you can take the third item, and then we can swap notes on what we found. And so it's also a great collaborative tool. It's a great way to prompt conversations about family history. And in those knotty cases where it feels like you've hit a brick wall again, your research plan is a wonderful clarity check. You can come back to it and say, now, what is it I have been doing? What's the research question associated with this? And are there any assumptions in that are carrying through the research plan that maybe mean we need to reappraise? And it's that change is the only constant. We're not rigid with our research. We've got the scaffolding, but scaffolding can always be dismantled and put up in a slightly different configuration.
So I love that. That balance. We've got that structure, but we can keep it flexible. The main aim of that is to keep all these methods, keep them helpful to us, because that's what we need. When they're not there to be a pain, they're there to support us, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, you could quite reasonably, in some cases, be drawing on 10, 11, 12 different record sets or even more to solve a particular case. And to make sure you can keep track of what you've actually done in each of those and whether or not you've looked at some of them. Have you really exhausted all the options for your search before you say, I can't find my ancestor? The research plan is a really, really good way of keeping tabs on that. And if you get somebody else in at some point to help you, if you say, oh, I've got this conundrum and I just can't solve it, if you can ask somebody about that and show them your plan or maybe even your research log, they can help you follow that trail of breadcrumbs and sort of find your way again. So it's useful in all sorts of ways. It's actually about being able to support us when we hit a knotty point and we think we're stuck. And it's also, as we said, about by no means casting away creative thinking and those sidelines. It's actually about, in a sense, I think, by having a plan and having a path in place that we're trying to follow, it allows us, I think, the confidence to invest a little bit of time going off on those side chains sometimes, confident in the understanding that you have a path to come back to.
Mm.
And I think that gives us the best of both worlds. So I would always say, if you like rabbit holes, and I think I know you enjoy the rabbit holes like many of us do, don't you? Don't you, Helen?
Mm.
I always say to people, set a timer. Don't be afraid of the rabbit holes, but maybe set a little timer for half an hour and say, oh, newspapers can be one for a lot of people. And you set a timer and say, do you know what? I've found a possibly interesting side chain. I can see in my research log what I've done this session. I'm going to allow myself an indulgent half hour just having a look and a wander and a creative explore of this particular resource in whatever way I choose. And then by the time that time's up, I'll come back to the path and I'll carry on with what I was doing. And you're getting a bit of a balanced diet there, and you're not shutting off the creative channels that can give you a perspective shift or help you find some crucial breakthrough material sometimes, but you're also retaining a sense of the overall structure that's going to help you as well. As you said, when you're trying to say, is this my ancestor or isn't it? Having
Mm.
that plan in place will help you make the judgment call of whether or not there are any holes in your research, whether you think a namesake could have sneaked into your tree, or whether you think you've got your man or woman.
It's important stuff. So there's lots of things to do here, but they kind of boil down to those three core elements of kind of logging it, setting up a good question, making a plan, and to help us. So for somebody who's feeling a bit overwhelmed, how can these kind of three core skills, the logs, the questions, and the plans, how can they be a turning point and help somebody who is feeling overwhelmed with what they're finding in their family history and get them to kind of a place of clarity and confidence?
Oh, so many different ways they can support you. I mean, I think, as we've already said, a few minutes ago, volume of records and volume of evidence is something that's a genuine challenge for each of us. It's a family tree for a reason. We start with us, and then you've got a doubling of direct ancestors each generation. Even if we're just thinking direct ancestors, we actually want to be thinking about their siblings as well. So that's a whole lot of information, and we can end up slightly drowning in it. So having that structure in place is just going to help us order things a little bit more and invite us into a space where we're asking what we would like from the research. We talked in the research plans about prioritizing things. We all want slightly different things from the research that we're doing. And I think being able to be honest about what you personally want from that research is going to bring an awful lot to your experience of it. Some people love military research and that's what they would prioritize. Other people might be less keen on that, might like occupational research of a different kind, and so on. So I think if somebody's not really used these tactics, I would say don't feel a bit like that marathon idea we discussed. Don't feel that you have to be jumping in at the top level. Start small, and it will just start to provide extra little bits of support along the way to your research path. You will, over time, as these become little habits and they start to be just a natural part of how you work, older you will look back at younger you and go, oh, thank you for starting to do this. You'll reach a brick wall at some point, and if you've been keeping a research log, you'll suddenly realize, oh, I've actually got some information, like diagnostic information I can use to work out what to do next. So I would say if someone's feeling overwhelmed, start small. Start integrating some of these practices in little ways. You might not be starting off writing some, you don't have to be starting off writing some 20-page research plan. Nothing necessarily as formidable as that. Start small. See how just having that little bit of time to reflect on a research question and whether or not that is serving a purpose for you, and all of these practical things that logs and plans can bring us in terms of making sure we're not just stuck in our research rut using the same old 2 or 3 record sets we always use, but we're actually really delving into the gems, sort of panning for gold and finding some of the incredible, maybe more obscure record sets out there that we might really enjoy working with. Somewhere out there will probably be for all of us a record set you haven't yet seen, that's something you are going to love working with, that could become like the grand obsession of your family history experience. And you haven't met it yet, perhaps. And I suspect you will meet it once you start doing some research questions and plans and opening your eyes to the sheer wealth of stuff that's out there. This is not a thing of misery, it's a thing of joy. And that's what I think most of us want from family history. It's, the stories can some of the stories are happy, some of the stories are sad. There's the whole sort of sphere of human experience comes up in family history. But I think we are best placed to really discover that and do our ancestors justice if we start off with some scaffolding in place that's going to help us navigate that route forwards.
Mm, yes. So, why would you encourage someone, even if they've been researching for years? Because there's many of us who have been doing family history for a long time, but maybe we're a little bit feral on the methodology. So, even if you've been doing research for years, why would you encourage someone to invest in strengthening their research methodology now? Like, even if they've done many years of family history, would it still help them?
Absolutely, in a word. I think there isn't a single one of us, I think, that ever stops developing as a researcher. If you speak to somebody that has been researching for 30 or 40 years, they will still find things that they haven't experienced before or new ways of doing things. And I think we should all be open to saying, "Oh, are there new ways I could be working that might suit me even better than what I have been doing?" Are there, in some cases, it can be that technological advances give us new ways of approaching things that maybe we didn't have years ago. And I think we all, as our ancestors teach us new things as we move through that process of researching our family tree, I think we all learn as we go. Everyone is in a process of learning, and I don't think that stops for any of us. So I think there is a real value to even if you've gone 25, 30 years or more and never had a research log, I would say give it a go. See what it because what's going it's not going to hurt, is it? If you say just give this a go and see what it might bring to you and your research. And actually, what I hear the absolute most when I teach people, and I've had people on my talks and courses that have been, researching for 40 years in some cases, who have very much said, I wish I'd done this earlier. I hadn't realized there was this wealth of stuff that I could be accessing. And I've opened my eyes to it now that I'm just approaching it in a slightly different way.
Mm.
So I would say, yeah, it's worth stepping into. There is always more that we can discover. And actually, I think chatting to one another about the different ways in which we might approach a research log or a plan or questions, we can learn about the many different ways that these can look in practice. If you've maybe tried some or all of these before and thought that they didn't work for you, it could be the particular approach that you were using didn't work for you. And trying to realize some of those approaches in a slightly different format does work. I've had some people that, as I acknowledged earlier, hate spreadsheets or digital logs. And their way of keeping a research log is a traditional written diary, and that works for them. And so that's the way that works for them. It's the log that is serving them, because these, as we said, these are not sticks to beat yourself with. These are special sort of approaches that are here to serve you and your research. So find a way that suits you, and it will be like putting on your own coat and shoes and getting very snug and cozy rather than trying to wear somebody else's.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sophie. So we're really, really looking forward to Sophie's course, and it's going to start at the end of September. And we'll put details in the links below. And in there, Sophie's going to be teaching the practicalities of how you actually do these things. So they're not theories about the methodologies; they're actually the practicalities.
It's very hands-on. We want people in this course to be, this is about your own research. As part of this course, I'm going to be encouraging everyone to connect with their family history and how they're doing it. Be really nice, and if people can be like open-minded about maybe trying out some of these techniques on their own family history. So I'm hoping that this isn't simply an exciting, fun methodology course, but in being hands-on, I'm hoping it's going to push on the family history research for everyone who attends. That's what I would love.
Definitely. Thank you so much then, Sophie. And thank you everybody for listening as well. Okay, see
Oh,
you soon.
pleasure to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.